Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm here with our host, Peter Scalzo, back from a little journey to the hospital this last week.
That's right. Yeah.
Back in the seat. So we missed recording for a week, so we're trying to catch up, right?
Oh, was I in the hospital last time?
Well, we missed for a few reasons, I think, maybe, but
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you were in
Yeah.
the
Twice
hospital.
I've had to be inpatient twice now, and I guess a distance of maybe 6 weeks between each other, but it had to do with a urinary tract infection, which became sepsis. So they hospitalized me last week, released me, so I have to go back today. Just the ongoing saga, this time related to the tube that comes out of my kidney. There's a lot of collateral stuff when it comes to the cancer space, right? Cancer journey. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the unpredictable nature of it, too, that
Yeah.
your life can just be stopped in a moment and you're,
Yeah, I
you know,
think that is one of the issues is at least me as a cancer patient wanted my life to return back to normal, but there were constant interruptions and, 20 years of it. So a third of my life now has been as a cancer patient.
that's a crazy
Yeah,
number, to say
yeah.
it.
So it's just how do I manage life? How do I manage happiness? How do I manage fulfillment, meaning, and purpose in the midst of a very long cancer journey? And a lot of us have issues like that, right? Ongoing issues and that are hard. Health, chronic illness, kind of things. Yeah. For some folks, the cancer journey comes on quickly and is handled fairly quickly, and they're a cancer survivor, and they can look back on it and gain a new perspective. But it's sort of done, except for ongoing scans and things. But and then there's other folks who it becomes a chronic illness kinds of thing. So, and I'm one of those people. They told me 10 years ago that I was a terminal cancer patient. So I have lived with quote a terminal illness for 10 years now.
I'm curious. This is not something that we had talked about ahead of
Yeah.
time, so I'm just thinking about, we think about purpose and
Mm-hmm.
and the importance of this, and so, I talked to you on the phone when you were there, and you were in great spirits, and
Mm-hmm.
a buddy of ours called up and said, "Hey, Sean, I think it was the Friday, said let's go see Peter tomorrow." And I was like, "Hey, he's already out."
Yeah.
um, but which I thought was cool though, that he was like, "Hey, I want to
Yeah.
people in your life want to connect with you." And but then um, what stuck out to me though was you weren't bitter, and so I'm curious. Maybe this is just an incident, but do you attach purpose to this visit in some way that is like, how do you digest where you're not coming into this feeling,
You're right. Again.
again, and it's
Yeah.
like this,
Hundreds of days in
yeah, and
hospital.
the bitterness
Yeah.
sets in or something like that. What's the
Yeah.
story you're telling yourself,
Yeah.
or do you have, like, from this experience, is there something you walked away with going,
Yeah.
I see my purpose here for this few days that I was in the hospital?
Yeah. Nothing specific that I can think of, but I have a general realization, concept, how whatever you would want to label it, that God has a purpose and a meaning in my journey, and I may not see it. I may not see specific stuff happen from it, and so I try to dwell more in the acceptance. We've talked a lot about that, but acceptance phase of, okay, I've got another infection, the fever went way up, I had the rigors, got to go back into the hospital. Am I happy about that? No, but I need to accept it. That's because that's when I am peaceful, is when I say, okay, like I was home and and my fever jumped. I really couldn't get out of bed. And I called my girlfriend, who's a nurse, who had to drive 45 minutes up to my house.
Yeah.
And she came in, and at 2 in the morning, we drove to the hospital, to the ER. And then I spent 3-4 days in the hospital. But Yeah, I watched her in action.
I was going to ask, is
Yeah.
there something about being loved
Yeah.
in times of difficulty that is an important part of the journey and that has purpose? It's something that stuck out about
Yeah.
this mutual friend of ours calling him was like, hey, let's go connect with Peter because there was a level of care and you never knew
Mhm.
about that. And I'm not putting a name out there to make this something about
Yeah.
a person, but just thinking about um, sometimes our hardships allows us to experience being loved. And I know that you had
Hmm.
said that your girlfriend had, you know, came in the middle of the
Yeah.
night to come and make sure to get you there and take care of you
Yeah.
and to walk through that part of the
Hmm.
journey, and it allowed you to experience being loved.
And, I had a couple of young nurses, um, and and they, of course, would ask me my history, and that's always a fun conversation after
Mm-hmm.
20 years. But then they start asking me further questions, and I was able to give them the Cancer and Peace website, talk about how I feel led and called to be visible about the cancer journey and stuff. And she was looked it up and all that. And I said it's faith based. It's about incorporating Jesus with my buddy in recovery, and we use recovery principles and just all kinds of stuff to do the cancer journey. And so I don't consider that necessarily to be
The
the
purpose.
special purpose why I
Yeah.
was there, but just and but it what I got to watch the U.S. Open tennis, and I'm a tennis lover, and I don't get it at my home, so I could just lay there and watch tennis, have meals delivered,
Wow.
and just get the IV. It's actually quite nice.
I don't want to attach too much meaning to this because I think this can be overplayed,
Yeah.
but I do think sometimes we don't see purpose
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
these little events, but and sometimes that purpose shows up later. And
Yeah.
but just asking the question and exploring it each time might be good too, just to say, hey, there's
I
something,
yeah, and
there's a reason why this has happened.
right. I think in the back of my mind and my heart and my soul, my spirit is that I am God's. I mean, He, according to Scripture, that I'm His beloved, and things are filtered through His hands first, right? And so there's that general assurance, that peace that I have that okay, I'm in the hospital. Jesus knows all about this. I'm going to be as pleasant as I can. I'm going to just flow. I'm just going to respond and flow as the time unfolds. I didn't know I was sepsis, and I didn't,
Yeah.
and it is what it is.
Some of us don't flow well with medical
Yeah,
situations. So
I've been
that sounds like a maturity that is
I've
part
been
of the
down
journey.
the
So
road a
if
lot.
nothing else, there's maturity that's happening
Yeah.
in this.
So I love the story that we were going to do today because we're still on the healing miracles.
We are. So you have not been healed from having to go to the hospital on
No.
some kind of regular interval, it feels like.
Yeah.
And so today you've picked out a miracle for us to talk about
Yeah.
because it speaks to you in some way.
Yeah.
And so do you want to describe it, the scene, or do you want to, how do you want to handle this?
Okay. So I'll describe it I'm going to paraphrase it, and sort of on the scene level, there's a village. I don't know how large the village was, but Jesus, of course, traveled on foot with his disciples, and so at least 12 of them were with him, but I'm sure women traveled with him, and he traveled with a group. He was a rabbi, traveling rabbi, and and he was approaching this town of Nain, Nain, and he saw in the distance this funeral procession, and he saw, how I think about, like, if you've ever watched a movie and the camera pans this big view and then it focuses in on this one little thing. I picture Jesus like is panning around, and then he focuses in on this grieving widow, this woman who is, her husband has passed, so she's in a tough place in that culture, but she has a son, so it's a great thing, right? Because the son can assume sort of the patriarchal part of her family. But what is she in a funeral procession for? Her son has died. And so they're carrying his body. And you can imagine how now she's a single widowed woman in that culture of that day, and how I can't think of a more powerless person as that.
Mm.
And just the devastation that she must have felt, just complete devastation, in every way, economic, personal, all that. And I see this vision of Jesus that focuses in, and the scripture talks about, because I've talked about this story before in front of a church, but this compassion that overwhelms him. It's like a guttural reaction. I forget the word in Greek and all that stuff, but it's almost like a response that he can't control. It just comes out of him. This great compassion for her. And it isn't like she's looking over at Jesus saying, come and raise my son from the dead, or people are saying, come on, raise him from the... No, they're not asking him to do anything. He walks forward and touches the body.
They have no belief that he has a resurrection power.
Yes.
Or not this group, I don't believe.
Yeah, it's just Jesus looking at a problem, looking at something that is devastating. And I imagine him, other place in scripture where he weeps, it doesn't say he wept, but I could imagine him being moved emotionally, not only with compassion, but with even sadness, feeling her sadness, and just this great compassion to means an ability to step into the shoes of another person and feel what they're feeling, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's empathy, but I think compassion too. Maybe it's the same. Anyway, and this ability of Jesus to do that and to raise her son from the dead. I forget what the scriptural language is, but he comes back to life. I don't know how long he's been dead. We don't talk about this story as much as like Lazarus and some of the other ones, but
yeah,
so it's sort of like this story. It's there, but we don't talk that much about it. But for me, as I go through my cancer journey, I believe he has that same compassion towards me, and or towards you, whoever's in a cancer struggle, that he feels what I'm feeling. He created me with emotions, that he feels compassion, and yet he may not physically touch me at a particular time. And, why is that? Well, it's a mystery, but there's something, that's where faith comes in, where there's a greater purpose or plan of his, not to bring me a physical healing, let's say, at a particular time, but to know that he has this overwhelming compassion. Like, I'm a broken man, right? I sin, but I'm a cancer patient, and it's like, well, it's not, well, Jesus is like, well, I can't give him compassion today because he did X, Y, and Z. No,
he was a lawyer.
Yeah, he was a lawyer.
No compassion for him.
Yeah, but it's this kind of thing where this is my beloved son. Of course, he's broken. He sins, and he's hurting, and I'm going to have compassion. I have compassion on him. I do.
I think it's such a great story for what you just shared. Is this, if you are in a place of suffering today, this is a story that when Jesus looks on you, he has compassion. It's not so much about how he acts on that compassion, but he has compassion for your suffering, and the way, like, if that doesn't bring a level of peace, nothing will. In one sense, this guy eventually died again, meaning that it wasn't as if he gave him a forever, life in that, the physicality of this story. He had compassion on the woman who had lost so much, and the scene and the suffering that was taking place. And I love the fact that you highlighted something, is that he didn't have to be called in. And so when we think about miracles, and we've had all this discussion about, did the woman have enough faith? I don't see any act of faith outside of, I guess, when he said, to the people that were the pallbearers, basically, um, stop, be still, that they stopped. And maybe that's the greatest act of faith that was there, rather than just going, move on, we're burying this guy, get out of the way. They stood still, it says. And so that's an act of faith, I guess. Is that as good as it gets on the act of faith here?
Yeah, I don't know what she was saying. We don't know. The
It,
scriptural record doesn't
it
give
doesn't
us
it
all the
doesn't give us
details,
something
right?
that points us to, well, it was her
Yeah.
faith that saved,
Yeah, no, it
that
doesn't say
changed
that.
thing. It was, this story is showing about his compassion.
Yes, and he didn't move into their circumstance because of someone asking him to. He moved into their circumstance because of the great compassion that he has.
So something that stuck out to me also, as you were, so that spoke to me a lot, that part of the story. And so I don't want to overshadow it with anything else. In one sense, it was this idea of that our God has such great compassion for suffering, and sometimes it moves him to do incredible feats.
Mm-hmm.
And inside of this, what I also see is something else that is maybe not quite so obvious, but it sticks out to me, and that is the perfect timing.
Mm.
Because Jesus just happens to be walking up at the exact same time as the procession is leading out to bury him. Had he been 30 minutes later, whatever, a little bit later, this story doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But what we see is an orchestrated perfect timing too. That is, to me, fascinating part of the story, that it's at the point of where a full loss has been felt, and yet not beyond his ability to enter into the pain and suffering and be the solution to that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. How does that strike you?
It strikes me as a very personal God, a God that wants to enter my space and share the pain.
Yeah.
Not necessarily spare me from the pain, because there's value to pain at times. There can be, right? And so I know for me, I'm not a fan of pain, emotional, physical, spiritual, anything like that. I say spiritual because there's been times in ICU when I felt that God had like walked away.
Mm-hmm.
So I say that to me was spiritual pain. I don't know, it might be emotional too, but it's the fact that God wants to enter into that with me.
Yeah, I was thinking, in the comparison between those in this story, is that without hopelessness, the experience of his divinity, the love and divinity, like the love, the depth of compassion and divinity, could not be experienced. So you describe, so if I look at your story, your depth of hopelessness that you got to has allowed you to experience the depth of, the great work that he can do in your own life.
And I think, Scazzero would say the deeper the suffering, the deeper the revelation. But I think it's exactly what you're talking about.
And he allowed her, by the timing of this, to reach the maximum point.
Yes.
Of suffering, of
all is lost.
All is lost. Yeah. They're literally walking a dead body out to be buried.
My life is over. And, my 2015 surgery was I only have a 5% survival.
Yes.
Chance, and there was much more cancer than what we thought. Basically, it's over. We're done. And for me, I had lost hope. I was hopeless.
I think that's such an important message, is that depth of hopelessness means that the reliance on the greatness of God's power is like the deeper we see ourselves, you mentioned the spiritual, the deeper we see and understand our depravity and sinfulness, the greater the God is that we need for the healing in that area. and that's the case for a physical healing also. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I see in the story is that God allowed the full depth of the suffering to meet the full depth of his divinity.
Mm-hmm.
And that may seem a bit punitive on the surface,
Mm-hmm.
but it had bigger benefits because as you read down in the story, it is the word of his divinity spread
Mm-hmm.
throughout all these communities, that hope was increased because of the depth of hopelessness that he overcame.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a act of spreading hopelessness or hope from hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great encouraging word, that, and I look at your own life, it's
Mm.
like the act of spreading hope from hopelessness is greatly increased if you don't have the story of being given go home twice, get your affairs in order, you're not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
um, the depth of your connection to God and hope that spreads from that is greater because of the depths of hopelessness.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in my case, those 2 times I didn't have a medical solution
Yeah.
because there was no medical solution for me. And it really did feel hopeless from a medical perspective, from every perspective. And so there was, I believe, with me more of a surrender to God. Like, okay, Lord, I have no clue where this is going. I have nothing to offer, and I'm broken. And I just surrender all this to you. And yet, at that point of surrender and hopelessness, really sensing his presence and his Holy Spirit and hope that he provides, right? Because he is the God of all hope. So,
I want to intertwine two
mm-hmm.
stories here with, because it's in this story, and think about, because I know that you've been involved in a lot of end of life stories,
Mm-hmm.
and this story plays out to John the Baptist getting word, hearing about, and his question is, "Hey, are you for sure the one?"
Yeah.
And we know that John the Baptist ultimately is beheaded,
Mm-hmm.
and so his God's compassion, as we know it, did not cause him to spare John's life
Mm-hmm.
from being beheaded, to be, taken out of the suffering that was in front of him. Um, and so as I think about that, it shows two sides of the same coin in one sense. But John found great joy in knowing that his his role actually had a purpose. His life had a purpose and meaning, and he was willing to even give his life for that purpose and meaning. The thing that he wanted to know the most was it for truth? And the way that was answered was, the dead are raised to life, blind are made to see. And he shows how he comes and demonstrates he is God. And John knows that he can die in peace himself, knowing that he didn't proclaim someone who was a false prophet, that he could actually point to these very acts for his own fulfillment. And it may seem a bit tangential, just not on the edge out there, but I think sometimes it's easy to ask, well, why did Peter get this and I get that? Or why am I not seeing that same compassion that this person had? And there's going to be a lot of questions that are left unexplained. There's mystery behind.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we can still put our hope in that God's not uncompassionate and compassionate at the same time. He is compassionate all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But his purposes may look different for each of our lives. Is that a good way to think about how this plays out? And that John had a distinct purpose for his life, and it was fulfilled already. It was completed.
Mm-hmm.
What he was called to do was there, and he didn't die without joy. He died knowing that his purpose was accomplished. And Jesus said about him, among men born of women, there's none greater. He gave him maybe the highest compliment that you could give a man. I mean, wouldn't you want to hear Jesus say, hey, there's none who are greater that are born as an earthly man?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a couple thoughts.
Yeah.
First of all, I think we in our Western minds are uncomfortable with the concept that there's a mystery of God, that we want definitions, we want answers, we want concrete, blocks and things to stand on and say, this is why this happened. And yet, through the ages, including the Jewish mind, they were okay. They accepted the fact that God is a mysterious God, and there were tensions, and they accepted that. It didn't negate God's all powerful, all loving status. The fact that they couldn't reconcile how bad things could happen and all that, and so I think that I'm more comfortable with the mystery of God now than I was before, after having gone through what I've gone through. And so now it's even like, why did I experience that healing back in 2017 when I wasn't supposed to survive? And I don't know. And I was as surprised as anyone else. I knew God could heal.
Yeah.
I just didn't know it would happen to me in that fashion. And I know he has a purpose and a plan behind it. I think what I want to talk about is tangential to that, but I'm comforted by the fact that John the Baptist had doubts.
Yeah.
I'm comforted by the fact that this man who knew his mission, I must decrease, he must increase. I'm unworthy to even untie his sandals or tie him up or whatever. He knew who he was. He knew that he was the forerunner, the Elijah before the Messiah. So he knew his purpose, yet when he was in prison and in a tough place, in a painful place, he had doubts. And he said, are you the one? After everything he had been through.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that Jesus doesn't scold him.
He gives him the story as a compassionate answer.
You see what's going on.
It was a different form of compassion.
Yes.
But it was exactly the compassion that we're talking about, is that even though John didn't get his life, so to speak, in the way that we would have thought might be beneficial, he was given great compassion.
Yes.
And that is really the story of today's episode, is that there's great peace in knowing that God has compassion, no matter whether you're experiencing healing. And the beauty of this story is that it wasn't a story about having enough faith or too little or too much faith. It was a story about God's compassion.
Yes.
And that's what he wanted to demonstrate and us to know by reading the story.
I was in my crew this morning and we were praying, and one of the guys prayed, our lives haven't turned out the way we thought that they would. But I appreciated that statement, and I was thinking, there's a lot of things that have happened in my life, just mine alone, that people would view as tragic. And yet, can I sit in that compassion of Christ as I look back? Can I look at a 20-year cancer journey and say, Jesus has been compassionate with me? And that's a tension, right?
It's maybe the real faith in one sense is not faith that you're going to get a healing.
Right.
But it's a trust in God's compassion is real.
Yes.
Even if it doesn't look like what I expect it to.
Thank you.
Which I think is what you're talking about. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, it's a great message. But I think when we think about cancer and peace, knowing that the power of the universe, the one that created us and everything in it, has compassion towards us, should bring great joy and peace that we can rest into. And your life's an example of it. One might say, yeah, but you got the positive end of the stick. And I would argue, yeah, there's a truth to that. But then also we opened the show today with, or our podcast today with, hey, you just spent a few days in the hospital because this gift also has a very difficult side attached to it. Yeah. And that is there's suffering that you are going through regularly as you do a third of your life with a cancer journey. That's not an easy journey.
Well, if your viewpoint on death is that that's it, life ceases to exist, that's one thing. But if your view is we go on to an unbelievable place that we can't even imagine, then still being in this body that's still struggling. After
Your suffering
20
has been
years, you
prolonged.
wonder, yeah.
Yeah.
But our good friend Wes says that I wasn't well done. I was only medium rare. So God wasn't ready to take me.
That's kind of how I like my steaks. So
Yeah.
Wes might like
Anyway.
his well done, but yeah, I get the point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is maybe a good place to end.
Yeah,
It's just really,
sure.
we've explored something that is,
Mm-hmm.
I think is rich and brings great hope to me. And no matter what it looks like in the current moment,
Mm-hmm.
God's smiling on us with compassion, and he has the best in mind for us and for all that's going on around us. And let's trust it. I think that's the message.
He is a God of compassion.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks, Sean.